how are you? The real Precious in the house.
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Glad to be back with you. I really appreciate you reaching out to me. I'm really glad to be back. But I'm doing
Oh well,
good.
thank you, and I appreciate you coming. And we're gonna take some deep dive, conversation this time.
Okay.
Last time was a little light. It was like, who's the real Precious? But now we gotta get into some deep, deep, deep stuff because it's
Okay.
been, I would say, almost 6 months.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Time is
that's
flown.
it's rolling. It's
Yeah.
rolling.
Yeah, it definitely is. So let's get into it.
Let's get into it. The last time we spoke, you talked about you coming out of foster care
Hmm.
and foster care system, especially when it comes to African Americans, is not really talked about enough on the news. It's
Anyway.
definitely not a straight that I know of a YouTube platform or any social media platform that really talks about
Yeah.
foster care. And I think that it's time that for at least, I'll argue, for the month, that subject needs to be kind of talked about. It really needs to be flushed out.
Mm.
Um, I know that there are issues when what they call age out.
Yeah.
That could be man or woman, where people are being aged out. Every once in a while, you hear about the horrible story of parents.
Yeah.
That's about as close to foster care because I know some people, but I've never really had a conversation
Hmm.
about that experience, about that life, about all of that. And I
Yeah.
believe we could talk about that. And hopefully, even people that hasn't been in foster care may have had, if you want to call it that, foster care experience.
Right, right. Because it's not necessarily foster care for everyone. Some people could have moved a lot or been in orphanages. So
Exactly.
definitely that transient lifestyle.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. So if you don't mind, can you kind of just explain how you got to foster care if you don't, if you want to go that
Oh
deep
yeah,
into the
yeah. I'm
story?
fine. I'm fine with it.
Okay.
And before I do that, I did want to let you know that there is a National Adoption Awareness Month. It's in November, but not a lot of people know that.
Oh, okay.
So you know how
Okay.
there's like a National Donut Day and
Right.
so National Adoption Awareness is in November, but because of the holidays and things like that, like you said, the conversation is just not there. You don't really see a lot of advertisements for it. So I did just want to let you know that because not a lot of people know that.
Well, I'll put it like this. As soon as um this video is definitely ready, then we'll just make it Uncle Stu's National Holiday Month. So we
Yes,
won't even wait till November. We'll
I
get
know
this
that's right.
information out now.
I know that's right. All right. So, the way that I landed in foster care was that my mother was a drug addict. And
Okay.
so my brother and I'm the oldest of seven. My brother and I lived with her until I was two and he was one. After living with our mother, she struggled with, abusing drugs. She had a homemaker that tried to come in the house to help her, but it just wasn't enough. So eventually we went to our great aunt house to live with her. Both my brother and I, we lived in the projects, Curry Woods in Jersey City. And she actually passed away. And so
Your
after
mother?
my great aunt that we lived
Okay.
with,
Okay.
she passed away, and after she passed away, they put us in foster care, and putting us in foster care meant me and my brother split up. So we were in different homes. We were in about four homes until we got adopted, and we were split up until we got adopted. So we got adopted together.
That split up between you and your brother. How did
Mhm.
you feel? What did you
um
how old was you when that happened?
so I was two and he was one, so we were fairly still, well, I was two, he was one when we went to my aunt Judy's house. By the time we were leaving her house, we were about 3 and 4. So
Do
we
you
weren't
have
we
a do
weren't
you
with
have
her
a
long.
strong memory of that, or is it more of a vague memory?
It's more of a vague memory. My brother actually has a more his memory of that is actually stronger than mine is.
Okay.
So I don't remember that. Honestly, to tell you the truth, Uncle Stu,
Mhm.
I don't remember leaving my mom. I don't remember living with my great aunt Judy.
Hmm.
I don't even remember the houses that I lived in foster care until the last foster care home. And I was in her home the longest, and I left at the age of 8. So I believe I was there from 6 to 8 at my last foster care home. And so I remember that vividly. But anything else before that, I can't, it's vague memories,
Well,
honestly.
that's fine. Let's go on just what you remember versus other people feeding you a story or
Right.
feeding you a narrative.
Mhm.
And because I know of your age, yeah, that was a serious crack era, which would have
Mhm.
been, in the 80s.
Yep.
It was horrible.
Mhm.
A lot of people want to blame the 94 crime bill. I'm sitting up here saying, no, y'all don't realize what was going on in that time, in that
Yeah.
era. They did not see the implosion of the inner city. So, is your mother a recovering addict now? How is she
She
today?
actually passed away in 2016.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to hear about
And
that.
not, from an overdose or anything, but she was sick and passed away. Of course that didn't help, but
Right.
it wasn't from, an overdose. Most people would think it
OD
was
on
that,
drugs. Right.
yeah, but it wasn't.
Okay, good, good, good. For what you remember now, we're kind of in that teenage years. Um,
Hmm.
how did you handle? And when I use teenage years, let's take the 15-year-old young Precious.
Hmm.
Who is that 15-year-old, and then growing up to say 18?
The 15-year-old Precious, she played basketball.
Okay.
And so she was also in the marching band. And at 15, I didn't want to be a part of the popular crowd. I kind of just trailed blazed my own trail.
Right.
My parents were very protective over my brother and I, very protective. We lived in the house where, there was blocks on the TV, on the internet, everything was monitored. So we lived a very sheltered life. And so it was almost like going through the motions. I was
Mm.
very, I wouldn't say shy, but I was very to myself.
Okay.
Again, I played basketball. I was social, but to a point.
Okay.
And because I lived a shelter life, I couldn't be more social than I was. It was come in, practice, homework, that very routinely lifestyle. My mom and my dad, my dad worked at that point. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So we had a very tight knit ship,
Okay.
it was, like I said, very structured. And
Right.
so it was just that 15-year-old Precious that was not anywhere close to even having herself figured out at all whatsoever. Like I said, just felt like I was going through the motions of
Do
doing what
you
I needed to do in school and sports and things like that, church.
do you think she's figured out now?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
When did that transition started?
That transition started actually when I started to go to therapy.
Okay.
Adoption was actually traumatic for me. My last foster care home, like I said, I don't remember leaving my mom. I don't remember my great aunt or any foster care homes before that. But
Right.
that last foster care home was home for me. Like it felt like home. You couldn't tell me I was leaving. You couldn't tell me that my foster mom, Bernadette, wasn't my mom.
Right.
It just worked for me. And so I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of resentment, and it stayed with me because there weren't discussions about it in the home. There wasn't. I always wrote and got my feelings out that way, or I would read, but I wasn't very vocal about how I felt. And so it didn't start turning around for me until I went to therapy. I was
Okay.
actually in a relationship, and the guy was like, "You seem angry. Like you seem like something's wrong with you." And I couldn't deny it. I
Right.
couldn't, try to wiggle out of it because I knew that there was something wrong. And so I started
Mhm.
going to therapy, and it took a few tries before I found someone that I was comfortable with. But even the appointments that I were going to, and they weren't, my therapist that I would stay with, I still took a lot out of it because it helped me sit, it helped me relax, it helped me breathe, it helped me speak to someone that wasn't even attached to my life, to anything. And so I felt comfortable enough sharing it with that person on the other end. And then, like I said, I found someone that I was comfortable with. And so, I continued to go to her, but it didn't turn around. And I didn't go to therapy till I was around 2021. So around that time, and emotionally, I was putting myself together.
I want to take the deep dive because I do plan to speak on this subject, the angry Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
You said your boyfriend recognized you being angry.
Mm-hmm.
And you received what he had to say and you went and got help.
Yeah.
From your experience, do you see that women are angry and need help, or is that a trope?
No, I do see that women are angry and they need help. We always talk about accountability, and we as women can invest in everything else, our hair, our nails, purses, even buy your first home, right? You're investing in real estate. But none of those things, no matter what you invest in on the outside, if you're not invested in yourself on the inside, it's going to come out on the outside. And a lot of women want to be the boss chicks, and it comes out in that way. And they think that that's very positive for their life, not realizing that, again, if you're not taking care of the inside, all of those outwardly possessions aren't going to feel good after a while. You're always going to be trying to find enough, find the next thing. And you have to clear it. I always say clear in the pipes. When you have a clog in your pipes, your water is not going to run through, clear. It's not even going to come through,
right?
Until you unclog those pipes. And so I recommend that women be accountable and aware. And the thing is, women are aware. It's not that they're not aware. They're very much aware. They just don't want to look in the mirror and actually face the truth. They don't want to unpack that because it might take a lot of unpacking. We go on vacation. Sometimes you don't want to unpack that bag as soon as you get home. You might put it in the corner and be like, I get to it on the weekend. But when it comes to yourself, you got to get to it right away. You can't let it sit, because you go on another trip, you're going to still have the same bag from the last trip. So, and I always say, pack light. Be able to unpack your bag, be able to get those things off your chest, be able to actually speak to someone and trust someone, because it's rooted in untrust too. I didn't really trust a lot of people either because I wasn't sure of myself. So if you don't take those steps to do that, then the anger is going to be there. It's just going to come out in ways that you think you're doing good for yourself and you think you're progressing, when really, again, those outwardly possessions aren't going to feel as good if you don't take care of yourself.
So those outwardly possessions is really nothing but a Band-Aid of what's going on deeper inside.
Right.
You also talked about trust. Where do you think the mistrust came in at for you as an individual?
For me, well, I can say when I was in foster care, I trusted.
Okay.
When I transitioned to adoption, it's not that, because I couldn't speak about my emotions, and because when you're adopted, an older adoptee, I was 9 when I was adopted. So I had a life prior to being adopted. But when I was adopted, it almost seemed as though we were supposed to carry on with our lives and not be able to address our life prior. It's almost like you're our kids. We're, going to provide you with this great life. Let's move on. And for me, that was hard because, like I said, my last foster care home was home for me. Emotionally, I was okay. I was happy. I was, I didn't want for anything. And in my mind, I was able to just be a kid. Now, I was in Jersey City. The surroundings to me, I go back to Jersey City today and I'm like, wow, like I really lived here.
Right.
I wouldn't want to live there today, but those things weren't on my mind as a kid, as I was being a kid. And so not being able to address those things and bring them into the reality of the adoption, because you do have to mesh the two in order for the child to feel confident in their identity. And so not being able to talk about those things and the conversations not really being initiated for me gave me the feeling of, well, I can't trust you emotionally.
Mm.
And so there was a void there. There was a disconnect there. And social workers and our caseworkers and things like that would, they told my parents to call each other mom and dad. So we would then call my parents mom and dad. And so it was like they wanted to not necessarily force the connection, but they wanted the parents to not really address any of the prior life. And for the children, while that may be okay for the parents because they weren't there. And so it's
Right.
easy for them to just, continue on with their life with children and learn how to maneuver that. But again, me and my brother came from two separate foster homes. So the needs that he had and the needs that I had were totally different. The experience that he had and the experience that I had were totally different. But
Right.
we were in a home and we were parented the same way. And like I said, it was like a machine, a well-oiled machine, and not to say that it didn't break down sometimes because we weren't perfect.
Right.
But that emotional connection wasn't there. And I think for a lot of women, the emotional connection is broken somewhere. And so as soon as it's broken, now you don't trust. You have a guard up. You have a million and one excuses of why this and why that. And so because that emotional connection wasn't there, I didn't trust other I didn't really have a blueprint in my adopted home to then be able to, model to the outside world.
Mm.
So like I said, it was like going through the motions. When you asked me about the 15-year-old Precious, it's like I was just going through the motions.
Mm-hmm. I like the way you transitioned that when you said there's that brokenness of trust, and then you're going through the motions of the trust. But then you talked about how in each relationship you really couldn't trust because you didn't have the transition. Help me with understanding, what does that look like when we talk about that transitioning from not knowing how to trust because you didn't have a blueprint for it versus, okay, so this is what I can trust. And when I say that, it is because I think for a lot of us, and I can include myself into that whole process of, I'm gonna say, trusting again. Recognizing when it got broken, but then that process, that's a hard process to trust again. Can you help me and help anybody else that's listening to you on that? I came on to say I can trust again.
Well, again, it started with therapy and being able to talk about my emotions. If you don't get it out, it's gonna stay stuck in. So the first step that I had to take over, making that bridge and walking over that bridge to trust again was to be able to actually say what my emotions were. Not write them down, not write little notes here and there, but actually say them and then receive what was being spoken back to me, because there were times where I was acting a certain way and I felt justified for acting that way. And my therapist was like, no, that's not how you handle that. Here's this book, read this book. Make sure you write notes. Make sure you write how you feel when you're, having this certain type of occurrence. If it happens again, how did you handle it the second time? So not only was I getting out how I felt, I was being honest about how I was handling certain situations so I could get that constructive criticism back. Another thing for me was my parents were religious and they were in the church. And so I can remember early teens where literally the spirit came over me. And people, like my other friends in the church, used to laugh at me. They used to, because my spirit was just drawn to the spirit. It was, I couldn't shake it. There were times I was fooling around with the kids in the pews too, but there were times where I was very tapped in. And I think because reading and writing was a go-to for me, being able to read certain scriptures to, literally hide them in my heart when I didn't have the emotional connection with my parents, it was like I can read a proverb and feel reassured is, I keep things posted. So I have to read them again and again and again. And so that repetition of reading, things that really comforted me and made sense to me, helped me as well. So it was a lot of getting in touch with my emotions, being able to admit certain things and be honest. I say have hot conversations, honest, open, and transparent conversations to then receive it and then put it in application. You know what I mean? And you're not going to, I didn't get it perfect the first time. I didn't get it perfect the second time, but I continued to do it. It became part of my daily regimen. And so that's just how I am today. I wake up and I read things that's going to encourage me, that's going to, talk to me in a way that I need to be moved throughout the day or whatever I'm working on. But the ability to speak through that has to be a constant. It has to be a constant for women because women like to hold things in. We have wombs, you know what I mean? And everything that we give birth to isn't beautiful. It just isn't. So we have to understand that we receive a lot and there's some things that we just need to let go. But it starts when we're honest about it and we can speak about it.
You talked about relationship and you're doing something or I heard you say something that's pretty unique. And I have to give credit to the first gentleman that spotted something. I'm going to use the word submission because I think you did do that. You submitted to a man who surely don't have a degree in psychology, surely don't have, any of the professionalism, but he was able to discern, see, or just common sense. You're an angry Black woman. And you received it and got help for it.
Yeah.
A lot of women wouldn't do that. So let me give you kudos.
Thank you.
In being able to hear that because I do hear that echo on and offline. Black women ain't listening to me. I hear it on and offline where I do think there's a large number of Black men that want to be with their Black sisters.
Oh yeah.
And it's that little communication that can do a whole lot.
Yeah.
Between that time, your therapy, how has relationships been? For
me, relationships have been, I want to say they have been I have good relationships. However, what I will say is because I'm so tapped into myself, that attracts a lot. But then once they see how, and when I say into myself, I don't mean superficial.
Self-centered, it's all about you.
Yeah.
Right.
When I say that, I mean I'm very spirit-led. And so I'm the person that is going to assess certain situations, not always according to my feelings, but also according to my spirit. And because people don't know how to let go, or how to let go in a healthy way, I should say, because I've learned how to let go in a healthy way. When you don't learn how to let go in a healthy way, then when someone does let go, now that triggers something within you. Because in relationships, we would like them to work till marriage, right? Like ideally, marriage is the goal in my head.
Right.
But every man that I have encountered hasn't been my husband. And I think that is something that women need to tap into a little bit more. I think women try to push and make things work with certain men that they shouldn't try to make it work with. And for me, I can see that very upfront because I have a father, because I listen to my heavenly Father. And so me, it's, dating has been good and relationships have been good. But what I will say is there's no one that has stuck. And I'm okay with that. I'm not, my time will come. I believe in divine timing. But I do believe that we as women need to know that, yes, the goal is marriage. You want to make it work. But when you see that it is not working, do not try to force it to work. Be okay with it being what it is and not what you necessarily want it to be, because it won't be good for you or the other person in the relationship. I believe in being equally yoked. I haven't been equally yoked with anyone. so far.
Let me ask you a question. You talked about having a relationship, and you're saying when that other person sort of got healed, got revelation, whatever terms that we want to use, then all of a sudden the relationship went to the left, went to the right. Some people can interpret that as a man that leveled up and he realized, hey, I kind of don't need you no more. You did what you had to do. I'm out. You have an old school song of, you know, the woman that comes home and the cleanup woman. You know, she cleans up the man, but she cleans him up for another woman. Do you feel that somehow you became that, or have you truly just gotten comfortable with whatever relationship you're in? It's just a time frame, and it just never manifests in itself in the end.
Yeah, I'm not one to say I wasted my time with so and so. You know, that's not how I see that. Again, I believe in divine timing, and so whatever I have gone through, I look at it as though I needed a lesson. I needed that lesson. I needed to learn this, or I needed to experience this, or I needed to be in this place. I never look at it like I wasted my time with someone. Right. Because honestly, and now I am going to be into myself. Right. But if I can't help, I don't harm. So anyone that has experienced me knows that it's, you know, my heart is in the right place. You know, so it's not that I'm ever, you know, mad or angry that something didn't turn out the way that ideally, you know, what the goal was. It's always all of it is working to me, and the way that I see it. I'm someone who does want to be married, and so losing sight of that and not being able to forgive or you know, look past certain things is not even something that I can hold in my heart, because I know that it's not going to come if I do that. Right. You know, so being patient, to me, love is patient. It's one of the first things that love is. And so I'm patient. You know, I'm not necessarily out here like, I gotta find a man. No, he's gonna come. Right. Do you want children? I do want one more.
Okay. How old is the one that you have now, if you don't mind sharing?
11.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, you're bringing me flashbacks when I think about my she ain't 11 now. She's 27, so you know I gotta get ready for a graduation. So yeah, but I remember. Yeah, I remember. Yeah. So where is Precious looking to go within the next 5 years?
Within the next 5 years, I want to have a couple of books published. Okay. For sure. I want to be able to speak to the adoption and foster care on a broader level. Okay. You know, whether that be in schools, whether that be hooked up with some agencies, adoption agencies, or even starting my own, you know, support groups for adoptees, and being able to mentor them, speak to them. So that's within the next 5 years. Putting those things into work now definitely will definitely get me started on the right track.
If you had to speak to, quote, the African American community right now, and again, I haven't pulled up any data statistics yet, but if you had to speak to the African American community, how bad is it when we talk about the Black community and adoption, or the Black community and foster care, or becoming foster care parents? How imperative is that? And is it, on the pro and con side, is it as bad as sometimes it's reported, or is that just extreme situations that's going on? Like, talk to the Black community about maybe getting involved in something like foster care.
Well, what I will say is that whether it's foster care or you're adopting a child, you have, your best interest has to be in that child. It just has to be. Unfortunately, in the Black community and other communities alike, but I only know the Black community, a lot of parents and even single moms or single parents in that community are doing it for a check. And I'm not saying they wholeheartedly doing it for a check, but they're not wholeheartedly doing it for the child. A lot of children who go through the foster care system are in there because they've had a disadvantage and a major disadvantage. And so when you have children that have major disadvantages, you have to understand that their psychological development, emotional and mental health development are all very fragile, and more fragile than a child that has been growing up in their home biologically. Not a lot of people know about that primal wound. So when a child is removed from their parents, that's an intrinsic wound for them. They become anxious. They cry forever, or they act out as they get older. They're acting out because now you're not connected to something that you're biologically connected to. You're around foreign people. And when you're around foreign people and you don't have that connection, that that love that you once had, it seems like you're a fish out of water. And so in the foster community, there's a lot of fish that are out of water, and parents don't necessarily know how to make that child comfortable, or they get frustrated, or they don't have the resources. The state doesn't necessarily, always do a good job on their end either with supplying those resources. A lot of people that I know that are in that field, they say we got about, 15, 20 cases. And what that means is they have to visit about 15, 20 homes in that day.
In one day.
One day. So you're driving from here to there, writing out your evaluations for that visit and, things like, so they're very overworked and I'm sure underpaid.
Right.
So if you are going to find yourself in the place of a foster parent, just know that you're going to have to seek after other material and literature and education to really tap into what the child is going through. It's not about you anymore. It's not even about the money that you're getting. Yes, the child needs to be taken care of, but the child needs to be taken care of mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I think that goes remiss. A lot of people just think, oh, that child just needs a roof over their head and constant food, and because they may not have been getting that from where they were at. And so you think that if you're doing those basics, at least you're giving them more than what they had, but you need to give them extra, and that's not necessarily the thought process all the time, because foster care is also temporary. If you're not fostering to adopt, that child is going to your house for 6 months to a year, if that, and they are going to another house. You have some foster care children who run away, so you have to, for one, we talked about, the therapy and things like that. Right. You have to be able to, say, can I truly give this child what they need, and am I open to receive what I need in order to be able to teach or love or show compassion to the child.
If a person can't do it directly, like if I use myself as the example, I may not have the home where I say, okay, I want to adopt a child or even to have a foster child. What is other avenues, what is other ways that, let's say, someone like myself or anybody that's listening could help, advocate, etc. What other things could the Black community do, even if they can't get their hands on deck and bring a child in the home? What is some things that we need to be aware of?
Honestly, just seek after different. So every county should have a family services building. Okay. And what you can do is go down to that building or call that building and ask them about, their services for foster care and adopted children. Do they offer any programs? Do they offer any support groups? If they do, you may want to volunteer. I know that when I was in foster care, when we would travel from house to house, we would travel with our belongings in a trash bag. So, an initiative for foster care agencies all around the world is always, being able to provide proper luggage for children who are moving from one home to another, because you put a child's stuff in a trash bag, and of course, as a child, you're thinking it's just a bag. But as you get older, you're like, wow, I wasn't even valuable enough to get a bag that closes with a zipper.
Right.
That plays into the emotional state of a child. And parents may not know how deep it is, but it is to that child. They are going through loss, and they continuously go through loss. And a lot of people's mind is like, oh, well, they're being granted better opportunities. But before every opportunity is a loss. I'm losing a home. I'm going to another home. I gained a home. Now I done lost that home again. So it's like the foster care and adopted child always feel like they're in a negative. You feel like you're in a negative until you are somewhere stable, until you are somewhere permanent, because you're just going through a whole bunch of losses until you actually win. And we spoke earlier about how some kids age out, and so they never win a stable lifestyle.
Right. Can you explain, because I do know what that means, but so that people can hear it from you. What does that mean, aging out, and what happens to those aged out kids, both men and women?
Aging out means at the age of 18, you can no longer be placed in a foster home. And so what that means is you are put out here in this world to figure it out. And a lot of children cannot figure it out because they had no stability. And so now they are trying to go through life. A lot of them get in trouble. A lot of them get locked up. A lot of them, go through the same pattern that their birth parent went through. Not even the people that they've been in the foster care homes with, but they repeat that biological cycle because it's in their blood. There are some things that are passed down to us within our blood. And if you don't have a stable life, if you don't go through the process of therapy, of flushing a lot of that stuff out, you're going to continue the cycle unknowingly. And so when kids age out, it's a dangerous place to be. Not a lot of people want to adopt older children. I was 9. I was considered an older child. My mom said that they actually were looking to adopt a baby. And throughout the adoption process, they have this picnic where all these kids need to be adopted. All these foster kids are there, and my parents saw me, or my mom saw me, and they said, well, she has a brother. So not only did they want to adopt the baby, but when they did adopt us, they adopted 2 kids, And so a lot of people just do not, they're not quick to bring a teenager into their home because it would take too much unpacking to actually, get that connection with that teenager. And honestly, it seems like a tall order. But at the end of the day, a foster child or a child that's been adopted, all they want to know is that they are good enough. Everything in their life makes them feel like they're not good enough. And so when they are actually paired with someone that is letting them know you are good enough just the way you are. I know this happened to you. I know that happened to you. And I know this happened to you. But you are good enough just the way that you are. And of course, you have to build on that. But that's the premise, and loving them. Mean, if you could do those 2 things, then you've already won half the battle. The other half is, getting them used to a new environment and, new schools and being around new people. But not a lot of people want to, climb that mountain. And so these kids age out, and they have no structure, and they have no family, and they're lost. And it's dangerous. Especially I always, I have Black brothers, and women, we can be expressive. We'll find a way to get it out, But I always pray for the Black men who are in the foster care, or boys in the foster care system, and who are adopted, because they don't necessarily always use their voice to let go of the pain and let go of the trauma. My brother and I came from two different foster care homes, and I can honestly say, and I can thank God and say, that I didn't go through anything bad. I didn't go through anything bad in my foster care homes. So I can thank God that I was protected in that way. But everybody's story is not the same, you know?
Right.
And so when it comes to Black boys, they grow up in this world, be tough, you know, don't talk about your feelings, and don't show that you're weak. But I wish that more Black boys were more vulnerable in that area, and they did speak to someone that they trusted, because that's where the mistrust happens for them. We all have a time where we stop trusting. And I don't think that we have enough men coming forth who were adopted or who were in the foster care home really be honest with their openness and their honesty and their transparency when it comes to the experiences that they have gone through, and that can hinder them, you know, and relationally, and not just with women, but with anyone. They'll grow up trusting no one, and we all need someone in this world. We all need someone to partner with, you know, whether it be in a relationship with the opposite sex, or a trusted friend, or someone that we can be honest with. So when these kids age out, you know, they have no one, and it's concerning. You know, the girls turn to, like I said, either what their parents were doing or promiscuous behavior. They're no longer, have no guidance, no shelter, so they're vulnerable out here in the world. And then the boys are just rough and tough, and they live that street life, and it doesn't last. They find themselves locked up in, you know, gangs and things like that. It's no structure.
Do you think that we need to set an alarm to our political system? Because we now live in an economy, and it's going to be kind of my focus for this year. We live in an economy now, and we're going through some things economically now where, to be totally honest with you, there's no, you're not going to make it being single. Whether it's a single mother, single father, singleness is gone. If we say that the average person, especially in the African American community, men making $45,000 a year, women on average $43,000 a year, the economy ain't going to support those numbers.
Right.
They're just not. Whether you're liberal, Democrat, Republican, conservative, do we need to start setting an alarm and saying, maybe we either A, change the age of this ideal of aging out at 18, which to me is an old system, or do we just need to be aware about aging out kids, and we need to try to do something structurally within the community as a whole to put our hands on that?
The latter. If we were, I've gone to other states where they've had, you know, community centers and places where, you know, children can go recreationally and play basketball and get, you know, help after school and things like that. I don't see that in every state. But when it comes to foster care children who are aging out, there needs to be programs for them to be able to learn how to live on their own, education, social skills. There needs to be programs where they're building the structure, and I think they do have some programs, but they're not necessarily for children who are aging out of foster care homes. You know what I mean? They do have communities where they have programs that if you're homeless or if you're out on the street, that, you know, you can, you know, enroll into those programs. And you still have to be qualified to do that as well. You have to go through some type of criteria. But there does need to be something for aging out adoptees, because like I said, a lot of people are not they're not adopting older children. That
Right.
It's not desirable. You know, they'd rather have a child.
I like something you said. Should we stop looking at 18-year-olds, whether they're men or women? Should we strictly be saying these programs or a certain program is strictly set for kids who are aging out or kids who has aged out of the program, strictly for those that's coming out of a foster care system versus trying to lump everybody in that one size fit all?
I think so because, like I said, I had different needs than my brother.
Right.
You know, homeless person is going to have different needs than someone who was passed from foster care to foster care to foster care. They're just going to naturally have different needs. Not to say that they both won't have needs; they both definitely will,
Right.
but they're going to be different on a mental and emotional level. You know, where the homeless person just may need housing, the person who is aging out of foster care homes needs schooling, they need therapy, they need, programs that teach them how to be social. You know, someone could have just fallen on hard times, right? And they just need assistance with housing, like I said. But someone who continuously out of their control is falling on hard times, we don't get to control whether we're in foster care. We don't get to control which house we go to. We don't get to control how many houses we go to.
Right.
There's so many things that are out of their control that to set them free in a free world, they're not going to know what control is. They're not going to know themselves enough for that if they weren't prepared in those foster care homes. And honestly, they probably weren't if, the foster care homes didn't keep them to adopt them.
Right.
They kept them for a short period of time. And once they got used to one system, they probably were under another system.
Right.
And so the control factor of it all, we do need to control it because then, we have our jails are full with Black men. I wonder how many of them were in foster care. Honestly,
right.
That's another thing. That's another place where especially Black men can get involved.
Right.
Go to your jails to speak to these young men.
Right.
So and us women can go to the detention
jail
centers and
right.
Exactly, to speak to them, because again, that control, thank God that I was adopted and we did have structure and control and discipline. That is definitely needed in any child's life, no matter whether they're adopted or not. But when they say you don't pick your family, well, some people do pick their family. I was picked. I feel like I was picked, and so within being picked, there was also a certain program that I had to adhere to, so a lot of kids don't get that. And so they don't know who to listen to. They don't know who to trust. They don't know who to talk to. And so they run wild. And who's really caring about a Black boy running wild going to jail? That's not what is catered to.
Right.
Right.
Well, what I want to do is you gave a wealth of knowledge, wealth of understanding, a wealth of a backdrop of your personal story. And I'm hoping that your story touch somebody, that your story, bring awareness. And I think that is what I feel is lacking, is that awareness.
Yeah.
I'm somebody that didn't go through the foster care system, so I don't know that experience. I'm someone who did grow up in a 2-parent home, so I do know what a structured home looked like. I do know that kids, it's funny because it's all of my friends that say didn't have that structure. My home became the magnet for all of them. It was like, man, I want to live like y'all free, But I understood it in adulthood, that attraction of wanting order, wanting, non-chaotic. What does that non-chaotic life look like? So I am very happy that you was able to at least be in a stable environment, at least know what structure looks like, even if you couldn't, let's say in your early years, put it together. It's like, I know what it look like, I just don't know how to build it,
Yep.
So I think that is a key. Um, I mean, I'll say it online too. I would love to talk to your brother because I would love to get his story,
Yeah.
his experience as a man. Um, I'm definitely a male advocate, but I am broadening my platform.
Mm-hmm.
I want to spend 20% of my time looking at problems. I want to spend the 80% of my time solutions.
Mm-hmm.
I do not want to continue down talking points because everybody got their own story.
Yep.
I don't have the big platform, but I'll at least be a voice.
Yep.
And that's all I can do.
Yeah, as long as you help one, that's what I say on my platform. As long as I can help one person,
Exactly.
I've done my job.
You done your job. So I definitely got to have you back. I told you about a future, live that I'm going to do. And I know it's going to jump off because start talking about the angry black woman, boy, that's a tough topic, but not for me because I can relate to both sides.
Right.
I can relate to both sides. So
Yep. And when you've done healing, a lot of people will look at you and perceive you as, well, who do they think they are?
Mhm.
And they won't listen to what you have to say. But what I will say is the angry black woman is really just a hurt black woman. And I think once she realizes that, she can shake herself free of the anger part of it. So we're definitely going to get into that.
I love it. Well, I want to thank you because I know you went to work and you gave me your hour after. But I really appreciate you, Precious.
Of course, I enjoy being here again. I really appreciate you having me coming back. And I look forward to coming back. We're going to have some good conversations.
Oh, absolutely.